Picture this. You're a foreign ambassador in the year 1665, summoned to the majestic court of Spain. The Palace of Madrid is a marvel, golden chandeliers, endless marble halls, and guards dressed in the finest regalia. You expect to meet a towering figure of authority, and when he tries to speak, only slurred sounds escape. His body is small, frail, and misshapen as if sculpted by a cruel god. He seems more like a broken puppet than the ruler of one of the most powerful empires in the world, a king whose very presence would shake your confidence. His tragedy wasn't born from magic. Instead, what you encounter is something that will haunt your dreams. Cousins married cousins, generation after generation. The Habsburgs ignored the warnings from doctors and priests alike. Their obsession with pure blood created a closed loop of genetic trap that would lead to disaster. The man before you cannot close his mouth. His jaw hangs open like a broken hinge. His people call him El Hechizado, the bewitched. But Charles II of Spain wasn't cursed by sorcery. It came from something far more horrifying. It came from his blood. The doctors were forced to sign documents declaring the child healthy, and outside the palace, the people were told they had a strong, perfect heir. For over 2 centuries, the Habsburg family ruled over half the known world: Spain, Austria, the Netherlands, and vast colonies overseas. He couldn't speak clearly until he was nearly 10. His tongue was so large it blocked his throat when he tried to sleep. His wet nurses refused to care for him. Some made the sign of the cross just walking past his cradle. The artist, Juan Carrigo de Miranda, expected to paint a charming child. What he saw instead left him shaken. He later wrote that Charles looked more beast than boy and had nightmares for weeks after. Furniture was positioned to block their view of his frame. Food was mashed into paste so he could eat without choking. But no amount of hiding could prevent the truth from slipping out. But in their obsessive quest to keep power within the family, they did something unthinkable. Where a normal person has 16 great-grandparents, Charles had only 6. His inbreeding coefficient was so high, modern scientists say he had less genetic variation than the child of a brother and sister. They married each other again and again. There was intelligence there, yes, but it was trapped. It's like a soul caged in a crumbling body. His slurred, wet mutterings were nearly impossible to understand. Ambassadors needed interpreters not for Spanish, but for Charles's speech. Eventually, he stopped trying to speak altogether and relied on scribes to write what he wanted to say. No church bells. Somehow, he knew he was different, that people feared him, that he wasn't loved, not in the way a boy should be. Servants said he would cry for hours with no cause. Kay would throw tantrums like a toddler, screaming and flailing over small things. Other times, he would sit still for hours, unblinking, as if lost in another world. The King of Spain, able to speak his own thoughts out loud. His skin was pale and blotchy, and he developed a strange smell described in court documents as something not foul, but unnatural, like rot that hadn't fully set in. No cries of joy. His lower jaw jutted so far forward that even when his mouth was shut, a gap remained. He couldn't chew. He couldn't eat solid food, and the church, hungry for influence, gave him more. Everything had to be liquefied, mashed, spooned gently into his mouth. Still, he drooled constantly. Just the horrified gasps of midwives and doctors who saw something they couldn't explain. His head was abnormally large. His limbs were thin and weak. He was so humiliated by this that he often refused to eat in public, leading to malnutrition and more health issues. She tried to assert herself at court, but soon realized the truth. Her husband could not be saved. The boy took one look at Charles and screamed in terror, but looked closer to 80. His autopsy revealed broken body organs in the wrong places, bones that hadn't fully formed, and signs of numerous genetic defects. It was as if nature itself had written a final, tragic message in his flesh. His mouth was frozen open in a haunting gape, that would stay with him for life. Charles was made to drink holy water mixed with crushed relics. His body simply didn't work. Yet, the court tortured Marie Louise with brutal fertility treatments, accusing her of sabotage. He vomited, convulsed, cried out, and the priests claimed the devils were fleeing his body. Uncles married nieces, and Charles II was the final result. His body bore the weight of centuries of decisions made by people who thought they could cheat nature. By the time Charles was born in 1661, his family tree resembled a tangled web. His very existence was a biological miracle and a medical catastrophe. When Charles was born, the palace fell into stunned silence. There were no celebrations, but no one was allowed to speak of it. The midwives were silenced under threat of death. Inside, the truth festered like a secret disease. Charles couldn't hold his head up until age 6. He couldn't walk until 8. The palace lived in fear, not of enemies, but of their own king. By the age of 5, Charles had his first royal portrait painted. Even with all the artist's trick shadowing, angles, idealized features, he couldn't hide the pain in the boy's eyes. The palace choreographed everything to hide Charles's condition. Foreign guests were kept at a distance. One day, an Italian ambassador brought his young son to meet the king. "Monster," he cried. Court performance could cover up the truth after that. Charles's condition only worsened with age. He had the famous Habsburg jaw. Yes, but his was a cruel exaggeration. Royal banquets turned into pitiful scenes of servants wiping saliva from the king's chin. Speech was another torment. Imagine that, but perhaps the worst pain was not physical. It was emotional. Charles knew. He grew up surrounded by priests, doctors, and silent servants, who treated him like a bird and not a boy. His hair fell out in clumps. Medical science couldn't explain him, so the court turned to something older: religion. In the final years of his life, Charles underwent more than 50 exorcisms. Yes, exorcisms. Priests believed his condition was a result of demons. They conducted elaborate public ceremonies right in the royal palace, but the demons didn't go anywhere. Not because they weren't real, because the damage wasn't spiritual. It was genetic. Still, Charles clung to the rituals. They gave him comfort. They made him feel less alone, so he begged for more. Charles married twice. Both marriages were childless. The first wife, Marie Louise was blamed for being barren-aving, though it was Charles who had never reached full sexual maturity. When she died at just 26, some whispered suicide. Others said it was the grief that killed her. The second wife, Maria Anna of Neuburg, fared no better. And neither could Spain. Charles II died on November 1st, 1700. He was just 38 years old. The man who ruled the mightiest empire on earth died alone, childless, powerless, and in pain. But his death did not just mark the end of his life. It marked the end of the Spanish Habsburgs and the end of an era. Charles II's story is not just about one king. It's a warning, a monument to the dangers of arrogance, isolation, and unchecked power. But nature doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. And in the end, it always has the last word.